Brandon is here to talk about rail and Metro rail.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor. As you heard, we learned that Bruce was unavailable to be here, and I learned this probably less than 24 hours ago. So I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but I threw some notes together, and Bart was kind enough to send me some suggested items that I could probably speak to. Again, I'm Brandon Farley. Sometimes people ask me, how did I get involved in transportation? So I'll do a one-minute spiel. It started about 25 years ago. I was interested in architecture. That turned into urban planning and urban design, and that evolved into transportation. I went to Cal Poly and got a degree in city regional planning, and then I got a degree in civil. It's a long title. It's civil environmental engineering, but it's a concentration in transportation planning. But I'm not an engineer. Never thought or never wanted to pursue like the EIT path for those that are familiar with the engineering profession. I was interested in planning. After college, I started with the city of San Luis Obispo. I didn't go very far. I was a transportation assistant there, and I was there for a very short time. And it's a very small organization. There happened to be some attrition right when I started. In short order, about 6 months, the 3 people in front of me decided to retire or move on. So suddenly I was in a position where I had to take over a lot of transit responsibilities. They also brought in some additional people. So I started doing the transit management stuff, and did that for about 2 years. I was very fortunate in that position to do one thing that transportation planners really don't have a lot of opportunity to do, and that was to add service. Since then, I often see that transportation planners in transit are cutting service. So I actually got one of my first major projects was adding service, and that was very nice. And I would like to say that it was a 30% increase in service, and it was a 25% increase in ridership within a week. So I'm quite proud of that. That said, after that I went to Central Contra Costa County in the Bay Area. Was a bus operator. Then I went to San Diego and was involved in mostly the trolley, and service planning on the trolley side, management there. After that, I came here. I've been here for about 2 years and 3 months in rail operations, service planning, and project development. I've enjoyed it very much. There's one transition I've made. I used to do a lot of public speaking, attend a lot of meetings, or interagency meetings, or public hearings and whatnot. I haven't done much of that in the past 5 years, so bear with me if I have a little trouble up here. Moving on, I came here to speak about rail operations, service planning, our current projects. I probably don't need to describe our current services very well, to a large degree here. Does everybody know about Metro Rail and what our services are? Red, purple line, gold, blue, and green. All right, I'll just jump into what our projects are right now, which I think this group knows a lot about. I think the Expo project is probably on the tips of people's minds. That's the next project that'll open. We've been working with, and I think everybody here is familiar with, we've been working towards a November 15th opening date. That's probably a week of November 15th we're looking at. The update is we're still sticking with that week, but it is going to be a challenge meeting that date. If everything goes well with testing and the remaining construction work that has to be done, we can probably make that date, but it's going to be pressed to do that. The testing that you see going on right now, it's a lot of train control testing, integration with the traffic control system. I think there was a video posted last night of the Expo train that made a run from the Expo Truesdale station out to La Cienega. I think I saw an 18-second video of that out there. That was actually a train doing some testing at some of the intersections. We actually had a lot of trouble last night with that train line. It's a 3-car train that we had at Truesdale. We had trouble with the 3rd car, so we actually had to leave that car at the station and just move forward with the other 2 cars. After that, we actually had problems with the brakes. We couldn't go 10 or 20 feet without the brakes locking out. So we had trouble getting all the way out to the end. It took a little longer than anticipated, and we did some troubleshooting, but we were able to finally get out there. The second car in that 2-car consist also had some problems with the dashboard lights. That held us up a little bit, but we made it out there. Actually, I would like to say that the 2 videos I think I've seen are interesting. On Metro side, sometimes we see that. I think the 18-second one was on the source. And that alerted to us. That was quite interesting. it's nice to see it on our side that people are out there looking at these projects and seeing our progress, and the proponents of these projects too. It helps us with how we feel about our projects, how about the work.
What cars were you using on that?
I don't know the train numbers, but that's a good question.
The model.
I'm sorry, the model?
The supplier.
For the Siemens P2000s or 2550s, whatever the Siemens.
Offhand, I don't know.
But it's the Siemens way.
That does bring up a good question. Eventually, we need to take out all the cars that we have assigned to the group right now and have them go through similar testing, make sure that the train control works with the traffic signals and so forth. I know we have this train set out there right now for the initial testing. I think originally we wanted to do some speed tests last night, but we weren't able to do that. It just took too long to do. I was lost in the Let me see. If I said that we're working towards November 15th, a week date for opening. If that date doesn't work out and it looks like it's being pushed out, we do have some logistical constraints that we need to work with. And that's a lot of that actually has to do with the holiday season and having enough staff on the metro side to help open the service, to do crowd control measures and the public relations type stuff. As background for East LA Gold Line extension, although it was only, what, a 5.6 mile extension, I think there were 9 stations, if I'm not mistaken. We had about 350 volunteers for that. This extension is longer, and there are more stations. The ridership or the demand we could see on that opening day could be greater than what we saw for the East LA Gold Line extension. So we probably actually about the number of stations. We will need more staff members out there to assist with the opening. Now, doing 2 openings back to back, as you know, we may only be able to open up to La Cienega for the first phase. We don't know yet. The Farmdale station, it will not hold up the opening date, but the Venice-Robertson, that station probably will not be done or be ready for revenue operations until the early part of 2012. I heard March 2012 mentioned as a date, but right now we're kind of looking at this from 1,000 or 2,000 feet, and some of the dates I'm mentioning are subject to change. So if that November 15th date is pushed out, it actually closes the gap between those 2 dates. The logistical constraint with having staff come in for this, we just may pull them together and do one opening at one time, which will be in March. But all of that remains open right now. That's the current status. I thought, I could go project by project and not have any Q&A in between, but I think if there are any Q&A right now, I could entertain those, or I could go on and talk a little bit about the Crenshaw project.
Let me mention something first. One of the common things on our discussion board is people actually say, well, why couldn't you just open the thing for the LA Times Festival of Books to USC, and you could kind of cover that, because I think you were explaining the problems with the testing and all. So if you could drill down a little, so people just think, oh, you've got the rail lines in the ground, the canyon is up, everything ought to just turn on like a light switch and it should work this second. So if you could explain a little bit in more detail, because a lot of people here could really benefit with all the contingencies that you need to have when there's a rail opening and what actually happens. And then we'll let the question here happen.
Well, I wish opening these rail lines were a turnkey operation where the contractor walked away and we could just start running trains without any pre-revenue service train testing at all. But that's the fact of the matter right now is that's what we're doing. It's just starting train control. And probably the first couple attempts at doing testing out there haven't gone as smoothly as we would like to, probably both on our side and perhaps on the contractor side too. Now, I explained last night about some of our problems. Actually, those were probably some things that happened in our end. Fortunately, the testing that we were planning on last night, they were, my understanding, they were outside the scope of the planned testing. They were kind of up and beyond some of the testing we wanted to do. Probably one analogy with opening a rail line, it's kind of like building a house. We all see when the wood framing goes up, the sheet wall goes up, and the stucco and whatnot. But you don't see what happens on the inside, the electrical work, the lighting installations, and so forth. That's kind of what's going on Expo right now. We're finishing train control. We're still doing some work at the junction with on-night train stuff. And admittedly, some of it is outside of my area of expertise, so I can't really speak to a lot of detail about it. If I knew about it, I would certainly speak to it, but that's pretty much what we're doing. doing a lot of the crossing the T's and dotting the I's and the final parts, and then some of it is just a little bit more substantial than that too. Did that help?
All right, and then we have a question from,
It looked to me like looking at the La Cienega station that the overhead you have is not gonna do any good in the rain. In fact, it's gonna be a negative. Do you have some way to keep people dry when it rains? It does rain in Southern California.
It sure does. Fortunately, it doesn't rain that often. That's why they call it, I understand the Rose Bowl Parade is Southern California's advertisement to come through. For rain protection, no. I don't know there is other than the existing awnings, or they're called awnings, things that are up there that have the blue wave in them. And that's largely just going to protect for sun protection.
People are gonna hate that when it rains.
Is the plan still to run the Expo line trains at twice the headway of the Blue line trains?
Yes. I'll probably talk a little bit more about a service plan or a service adjustments plan on the Blue line, but that's a good point, a good question. Initial service will be trains every 12 minutes through the base and through the peak period times, and at nights it'll be 20-minute service. In part, that's related to we just don't have enough cars right now to operate more frequent peak period service. Trains that will come in on the Blue line, the services will be interlines. So trains that come in on the Blue line, they will likely or quite possibly leave as an Expo line. It's going to be a decision point made on the control side at our rail operations control center, depending on where the schedule is made. Certainly not every Blue line train is going to go out as an Expo line train because, well, one, we don't have the number of cars, and there would be more frequent service than we can provide. Thank you. So I'll move on to Crenshaw, unless there's anything else about Expo. And we can go back to Expo also. Crenshaw project, as you know, is in the preliminary engineering phase. They're working on the final design of what that means. Some of the things we've been discussing more internally at Metro is doing a traffic analysis along different parts of it, making sure we have the grade crossing plans underway, and presenting packages to the California Public Utilities Commission. We're looking at two different types of packages. We have two different types of streams, as you will, to process it. I suspect, though, probably not a lot of that is of interest to this group. Some of the traffic analysis we'll be looking at in the next month or two, and an operations simulation, is what occurs along Crenshaw Boulevard, actually the at-grade portion where it comes out of the portal at Slauson and before it dips down, and I forgot the cross street where it dips down. It's about an 1/8 of a mile segment where the segment is at grade. At Metro, we're very interested in how trains will meet the green band, if you will. The green band to enable a train to move through the corridor without hitting a red light and getting caught up. The Crenshaw line is going to have a junction with the green line at the Aviation Imperial Station. And the way we're going to need to coordinate those train services, much like we're going to have to do with the Blue and Expo lines, and what we currently do at Wilshire, Vermont with the red and purple lines, we're going to need to do the same on the green line at Imperial and Aviation. If we're looking at services that are running every 5 minutes, essentially on that trunk portion from Imperial Aviation to, well, I haven't talked about that part, but there may be a trunk portion north of Imperial Aviation. We're going to be running trains every 2.5 minutes. Every other train is going to be an Expo line train. I'm sorry, a Crenshaw line train. So that junction operations are very important to us and how we can efficiently move trains through that corridor. If we don't miss going back to the Crenshaw alignment, the on-street portion, it's important to us to meet those green bands, because if we miss it in the cycles, the traffic signal cycles that we're looking at, if we miss our phase or band, that train is going to be delayed per our schedule getting to that junction. Now, something we can work with in a schedule, and kind of have the schedule we work with. That's something we're going to be looking at in the traffic analysis side of the next month or two. That may be something of interest to you guys. You probably won't see anything in the public about it. I don't know if there'll be any reports about it. It's something we're looking at internally. We're also re-looking or looking at some of the track work involved in the Crenshaw project on our side. At the terminals we have crossovers. We want to have them in the right place and the right type so we can get in and out of there in each direction pretty efficiently. We also look at crossovers precisely where they are in between stations to meet some of our objectives at night. At night we want to run 20-minute service, and that's where we do a lot of our preventive maintenance work. When we do that preventive maintenance work, it means we have to single track the lines, running trains in both directions on the same line. We have to coordinate that between the crossovers that we have out there. The closer those crossovers are together, the less impact there is to the headway, the less impact there is to the current schedule. So we're working with finalizing where to locate those crossovers. We have in our Metro design criteria for the light rail system, it's a 10-minute criteria or 10-minute single tracking criteria. That enables us, that tells us that, or guides us in, gives us an objectives to drive into for how we provide, where we locate these crossovers. Generally, they're going to be about 2 miles apart. It's about 4 or 5 minutes travel time from crossover to crossover. If we have them that far apart, that means a train, say, going in one direction, can travel once it passes beyond the single track segment. A train in the other direction can come in a 10-minute period. Now that helps us out when we have incidents along the rail line, or we need to do some type of rail work during the middle of the day and we don't affect the headways. But during peak period service, it's kind of a failure management type of effort also. Are there any questions about Crenshaw? I think I'll speak a little bit about the plans. I think I saw some of the video that Bruce Shelburne was here at last year. I think he spoke a little bit about what we're kind of looking at with the Crenshaw line and how it's going to weave with the Green line. There are two concepts out there and that are being studied as part of the environmental review process. One operating plan has westbound Green Line trains, every other train, if you will. One will curve north to go to the new Century Aviation Station on Crenshaw, and every other train will travel south to the Redondo Beach Marine Station, and if South Bay occurs, it would be the Torrance Station. The other concept is every Green Line train passes north and goes to the Crenshaw Aviation Station, excuse me, the Century Aviation Station. That operating plan actually looks pretty efficient, actually makes the junction operations work much more efficiently, and it looks much more doable. Although a decision still needs to be made, that's kind of what we're looking at in recent lately. Crenshaw project? No. Yes.
I know it's like so far away from now, but what's the likelihood of a future extension north, like to Hollywood, maybe beyond Expo, maybe on the La Brea, up to Hollywood?
You know, part of the West Side Subway extension, they looked at an alignment. I think it was called the Pink Line or the WECO alignment. That alignment, so I'll start from that discussion, would have had trains operating from Santa Monica or Westwood, wherever the line ends, would travel east and would curve up at a new junction in the Los Angeles area, go up San Vicente, the Santa Monica Boulevard, travel east on Santa Monica Boulevard, and then make a left turn, go northward on. He was highlighting and connect with Hollywood Highland Station in a T configuration. There would be no track-to-track connection. That alignment didn't move forward as part of the environmental review process for the West Side Subway extension. But there was the idea that, well, Expo is down there, and that, Crenshaw alignment ends at Expo. That alignment could theoretically, I mean, you could look at a map and you could make the logical conclusion that theoretically that line could continue north and somehow assume the same alignment and also at the Hollywood Highland Station. From my understanding, that alignment has some legs and it will be studied further. When that study will begin, I'm not quite sure. We could see it begin in the next 6 months, or it could be a couple of years from now. I suspect a couple other milestones would need to occur first.
Right.
The configuration of the possibility of the westbound Green Line trains all going up to the new station, Century Aviation, then what trains would they just go up and head back south down to Redondo Beach? Would there be a new junction? Would they not use that junction then?
Yeah, if westbound Green Line trains curve north and went through the junction and terminated at Century Aviation Station, the track work configuration we're looking at is a pocket track on the north side of the station. The station would be aerial, and the concept we're looking at is right over Century Boulevard. Green Line trains would pull into the station on the correct track, the northbound track. After unloading the passengers, it would pull forward into a pocket track, which would be between the two main line tracks.
Okay.
Once it received its, say, opening schedule to move southward, it would move out of the pocket track, serve the station, and then continue south back to the junction, and then continue eastward on the Green Line, ending in Norwalk.
What's the projected ridership of the Crenshaw line and construction timetable?
The ridership numbers, I believe, was in the 16,000 range, something like
16
that.
to 20,
approximately.
something like that.
There are additional projects out there. You may have heard about the South Bay alignment, and also if the Green Line also is rerouted. Both those activities could assume some probably new ridership. An argument could be made that ridership could be higher than that 16,000. Now, part of the West Side Subway extension, looking at the ridership model, we've actually looked at a whole network, a whole rail line network, and looked at it as one model and all the changes, what would they occur if they occurred all at the same time. We looked at a 2035 projection. If we used that larger network and you looked at just the Crenshaw stations, I believe the numbers we were looking at was in the 22 to 24,000. I could be off by 1,000. I think that answers your question. And the second part of your question, when it would be open
The
for
optimistic
operations?
construction.
It could begin construction in the next 2 to 3 years, an actual groundbreaking ceremony, or it could actually be sooner. The date we're using for a revenue operations date, that's assuming the 3010 initiative does move forward, is fiscal year 2018. Fiscal year 2018, we're actually looking at a couple other projects coming online at that same time also. The South Bay alignment from Marine down to Torrance, and an LAX extension, which, going back to the track work at Century Aviation Station, we still need to confirm the mode. One track work configuration we have is that pocket track would be turned into a revenue track and would curve off to the northwest, and would actually be grade separated. The two mainline tracks actually dip down in the concept we're looking at. The pocket track stays elevated and then would curve over, so we'd have a flying junction. The southbound track for the Crenshaw line, and would be where the LAX line would come in, would be probably at ground level, and it would just be curving to the west. So it would be not be a grade separation because it doesn't meet with anything other than the Crenshaw line in the same direction.
All right, well, let's move on to the next
Okay. I see
section.
Ruben back there smiling. Looks like a canary back there. The regional connector, actually, that we're looking at a revenue operations date fiscal year 2019. It's another project that's in preliminary engineering. Actually, if you take a look back and look at each of the projects occurring in or starting revenue operations in 2018 or 19, they're in preliminary engineering right now. Right now, probably the latest things we're looking at right now is the final track work configuration. We're looking at pocket track where the proposed Fifth Street station would theoretically be. It's being designed in a manner that if that station were to ever move forward, the pocket track would come out. We'd probably have a center platform station there. So it'll be constructed where a decision could be made later to put that in. We're looking at the curvature going into the Bunker Hill station, right on the elbow, as you call it, where it's northbound and curves, makes a right turn. I can tell you from my perspective, looking at that station, looking at a final design for it, it's quite an effort to try and fit that station in the correct place where you can maintain speeds going in and out of the station and to provide portal access up to the top of the hill. When we tend to look at the constraints or challenges, it's kind of naturally pushing that station out from underneath the hill, pushing it westward where you're closer to Flower Street rather than under the hill. One of the things that we want to do on Metro side is make sure that we have an efficient access up to the hill. That's why that station's going to be there. That's one of the main selling points for the regional connector, was to have access to the center of downtown. That being on top of that hill is a big part of that. Another thing we're looking at is construction phasing for the regional connector, and that's part of the preliminary engineering phase. The Little Tokyo Junction, if you recall, the junction will be under the intersection, and it will impact the existing Gold Line operations. We're working with how do we phase that project. One of our objectives is we want to maintain Gold Line service while it's under construction. That's looking like a greater challenges as we look at it. excuse me, we're looking at a concept where perhaps we can single track for several months up to a few years while that structure is being built underneath it, and what we would have above it would essentially be a trestle type structure. But it's something we're in discussion. We have a couple of concepts out there right now, and we'll be discussing that internally in more detail. But it looks doable. We may have a bus bridge for a period of time while that's under construction too. We also want to make sure that the portions that are ready for service, ready to receive trains, are actually beginning on the Flower side end, or the 7th Street Metro side end, so that we don't have that junction at Little Tokyo holding up actually running revenue trains there and prolonging the impact to Gold Line passengers at Little Tokyo. So are there any questions about the regional connector? Now, if you did, I could take a drink of water while the camera's on you guys.
Justin, you got a question? I'll have to do that one if you don't.
Sure.
For the regional connector.
Briefly, I know Metro was looking at having a grade separated, a flying junction at Little Tokyo. What happened to that?
You know, we had that discussion about 6 to 9 months ago, and I don't recall the points as well as I would like to. Constructability and cost coming up. The flying junction was much more expensive, and the constructability. We're looking at very steep grades coming out of the existing Gold Line alignment, and where we're coming from out of the 2nd Avenue line, or 2nd Street line. So having a flying junction would exacerbate that. It also would trigger having an over-under station configuration at Little Tokyo, which does remind me, the station concept we're looking at the Little Tokyo station. If you recall, the track alignment pretty much almost went south on Alameda before it made a sharp right turn to 2nd Street. We're looking at more of a modest curvature that goes right under, I think it's the Tin Fish, or it's the Fish Taco restaurant. Senior Fish. I'm sorry, everyone should know it. We're looking at alignment that goes right underneath that establishment, which would trigger possibly a taking. So that's one concept we're looking at. I'm not sure if that's quite right. So that said, I'm going to go on to the West Side Subway extension. You know, as you know, Metro is quite busy, and Metro Rail operations and service planning, where we have people on each one of those projects, but our staff isn't very large. Bruce is tasked with a couple of projects. Tom Jasmine, maybe a name you've heard, he's tasked on a couple of projects, and I've been tasked on a couple of projects. The ones I've been kind of the point person on is the West Side Subway extension, the Crenshaw project, and the South Bay project. And I've been assisting with Expo while I can, but as you can imagine, we're kind of constrained for time. So we can't all be everywhere at the same time. The West Side Subway extension is also in preliminary engineering. We're looking at a revenue operations date per the 3010 initiative, fiscal year 2022. At the same time, we're looking at constructability, and actually how to phase it. It's looking like we're going to be pressed to meet like the fiscal year 2022 date. It could be 2023. We just don't know right now. We're kind of still looking at this from about 2,000 to 3,000 feet. So there are some things that need to change, or that will change as we move forward. We're also looking at the track work, where the crossovers are going to be, and we're looking at service levels. I believe the operating plan that was most recently in the public view was, I think, 18 trains per hour on the Purple Line extension and 12 trains per hour on the Red Line extension. Does that sound familiar? I don't see any heads nodding. First time you've heard of that. Well, that was the concept as we went into advanced conceptual engineering. And until recently, that is what we were working with. One of our challenges on scheduling side is 18 and 12 don't really weave together. As you can imagine, trains coming together, you know, if these were trains or a schedule, ideally we want them to come in evenly spaced. Where a train goes through there, and I guess in Moscow, trains go every 60 seconds down the line. In Metro for the Purple Line extension, for the trunk portion, we're looking at trains operating every 2 minutes. That's 30 trains an hour. And theoretically, 18 trains per hour on the Purple Line, 12 trains on the Red Line. On a schedule, that doesn't work out very well. To us, looking at paper, it would look like uneven headways. 2 and 4 minute separation on the purple line and 4 and 6 minute separation on the red line. And when you begin to look at that, you begin to wonder about uneven boardings on the trains, uneven queuing on the platforms. It triggers a number of things that are a concern, and we didn't really have a lot of answers for those questions that were being developed. We looked at the operating plan with planning, we looked at the ridership modeling, and we're going back to right now even headways on each, where it's 15 trains per hour on each branch. Each line would be operating on 4-minute headways. That's what we're working on. One of the constraints for that project, and it's been on my mind since it began, was ventilation shafts, and how closely we can operate those trains together. The ventilation shafts and what occurs at the terminals is another item, and train control are all items that kind of dictate how frequently or close we can operate those trains together. The Santa Monica Mountains, that stretch between Hollywood Highland to Universal City, has been a constraint for a number of years. It's, as I recall, it's the best we can operate trains through there for our current policy and current infrastructure is a train every 6 minutes. And that's if everything we're just hitting spot on. That's no operating margin. That's train as soon as we can send it. It's no allowance for schedule perturbations. By that I mean if something happens with the train or on the platform and the train is delayed, it doesn't allow any slack in the schedule that we don't affect the train behind it. We have a policy for train ventilation zones, and our guidelines are for federal criteria. And I don't know what it stands for. It's NFPA 130, and there's a subsection defines ventilation zones. The policy we've been working with, well, probably for 20 years, has been 1 train per vent zone. We still have that, but we just realized we can redefine the ventilation zones. For Hollywood Highland to Universal City, that ventilation zone was station to station, including the station. That meant that if it Hollywood Highland, it could not move westward to the Universal City station until the train ahead at Universal City was already out of the station. That train ahead had to be out of the station before the Hollywood Highland train can leave. And we just reinterpreted NFPA 130. We had a very strict interpretation of it before, and we realized, and other agencies are doing the same thing, that we can actually define the ventilation zone. And our ventilation shafts and fans are all in the correct place to enable this. We can define the vent zones at the boundary where the tunnel box, or where the station box is, and where the station tunnel is. Our ventilation, well, you can't really look up there. If you go to the end of the platform, I don't even think you can look down the tunnel and see them, but there are big shafts, that's where they are. Reinterpreting that and relooking at our operations simulation, we can actually process trains more frequently through that segment. In terms of trains per hour, we're going from about 10.7 trains per hour, and we can now do 12.7 trains per hour. And that allows some operating margin. So overnight, our capacity, we're allowed to operate trains more frequently and more close together. We're going from being able to do 10 trains per hour up to 12 trains per hour on a schedule. That works out pretty well. But what I just said before is now we're looking at an operating plan. Trains operate at 4 minutes apart on the red and purple line. So we still have that challenge out there that we need to approach. How do we get trains from the Hollywood Highland through the Santa Monica Mountains as close as 4 minutes apart? Fortunately, we do have our transit capital plan. We already have a project in our list of capital projects that's funded through Measure R, and that's a ventilation shaft. The current concept is coming up at Solera Drive, but there are other engineering solutions out there that we've conceptually looked at before that looked constructible, such as popping out somewhere maybe in a 101 corridor through the Santa Monica Mountains. Unfortunately, that's a question that we don't need to ask and answer right now. We do have funding for it to do it when we do trigger going to 4-minute service, which isn't until 2035 or some year before that. We don't need to have it on opening day. So, what else is going on with West Side Subway Extension? Probably in the next couple of months, probably won't hear or see about it in public, but we'll probably undergo a value engineering element to this. Really scrutinize what infrastructure is a part of the project and what can we do without, maybe if not in the initial year, or maybe if not, well, there's a difference between initial year of opening to maybe some future year. So with that in mind, are there any questions?
All right, we'll start in the back with Kevin.
So a two-part question with regard to the red line. When are you starting this increase in service from 10 to 12 trains? 10 to 12 minutes, yeah, interval of 10 to 12 minutes. And related to that, does the addition of a single additional ventilation shaft allow you to then increase to 15 trains, 15 minute,
15 trains an hour.
15 trains an hour? So a 4-minute interval.
We're looking at 2 dates. One is the initial year of opening, and one is 2035. What happens in between those years, 2022 and 2035, we could see a different level of service out there. For opening year, we're looking at trains every 6 minutes, apart. We're looking at that right now in light of we do another effort that the public doesn't see. It's a rail fleet management plan. And we look at service levels for each one of our lines. That tells us how many cars we need at certain periods. Then we backtrack, and it triggers when we have to have these cars on property to deliver the services. But for opening year, what we were looking at least in October of last year, was service levels of trains every 6 minutes on the red. So that's 10 trains per hour on each branch. For 2035, we're looking at a concept of trains every 4 minutes. And they could either be 4-car trains or 6-car trains. As you know, probably everyone in here knows that we run consist and as 2-car trains, 4-car trains, and 6-car trains. Nothing's around the odds because those cars are married together in pairs. Does that answer your question?
Well, you used the phrase like overnight. You could increase the frequency of trains, so it made it sound like it was in the near term. This is going to happen because of your reinterpretation of these guidelines.
Yeah. Theoretically, overnight we could. You know, provided we would have to have the cars available. We would have to have the necessary infrastructure in place, such as the ventilation shaft, at least to go from a 5-minute frequency to a 4-minute frequency. That's probably the trigger to do the ventilation shaft.
From 10 to 12 trains per hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's 12 to 15 trains an hour.
So that seems like a lot of work to go through for just one freaking minute, from 4 to 5 minutes or 5 to 4 minutes. I think that's an awful amount of wasted time and everything. Why don't you instead keep the same amount of trains running, forget the ventilation shafts, and have them run later, like 2 or 3 in the morning? Because a lot of people that want to enjoy downtown LA, especially on the weekends, we gotta freaking leave at 11 o'clock. So we can make sure we're in the subway at 11:30, I think is the last one in Hollywood, and 12 noon at this other one. Doesn't do us any good. This is a 24-hour city. Run more MetroLink and forget the shafts and forget saving a minute. Give us more trains into the wee hours of after midnight.
I'm with you there. I'm with you in spirit.
It's a political question, and while the train folks can operate the trains 24/7, it's getting the information to the Zeb Yaroslavskys of the world and the Antonio Villaragosas and the political establishment that actually decides that. And if they hear you loud and clear, then that's where the change will come. It's not going to come from the operating staff that will have the challenge of operating it. It's the politicians like Zeb that have an attitude, who don't quite understand that people like to go out and enjoy themselves and don't like to be in bed by 11:30 at night. So
I do, but when there's
I
no
understand, but I'm
daylight,
just saying
you
is
can't
there is
separate
a group of folks to get that message to. So I mean, your sentiment is correct. It's how we focus it, because there's a lot of other people here that would like to be able to go to a movie that gets out at 1 in the morning, get a cup of coffee or a beer, and go home at 2 or 3 in the morning. And the trains are done at 11:30 or 12:30, then that doesn't help us. So, but there is a desire out there. I think you're absolutely correct, Pat.
You know, I'd
Next
like
question.
to add, we have to manage, we're charged with managing the system, and one of the things we have to do is manage finite resources, constrained resources, whether that's operators, cars, or in this instance, it's probably money.
Granted, you might not be able to pack people in like sardines at 12 or 1 or 2 in the morning, so just run one train.
Well, it's something that we'll get question. Alex? Al?
Well, I suspect in time, Metro will be a 24-hour operation.
Yeah, but you said 2035, I'll be dead by then.
You'll just be older, Pat. Don't worry about it.
Quick question, a little confused. When you said 6 minutes on the red and purple line, do you mean combined or 6 minutes each line, meaning 3 minutes combined? If you're
I was speaking to each branch. So the red line would be on 6-minute service or 10 trains per hour. So would the purple line. Together, when they're in the trunk, there would be a train every 3 minutes or 20 trains per hour. You know, one of the things we're working at is Union Station. That's where each one of these lines would come to an end. And as you know, many years ago, the plan was to extend the red-purple line out to East LA or to points beyond Union Station. Union Station was never envisioned to be a terminal station. Therefore, the track work we have there, although it's in the right place, we don't have the most efficient or fastest switches there. The switches that we have there right now, currently we don't allow our trains to go through those any more than at 9 miles an hour. We can probably go to 12 miles an hour safely. We need to change some of our train control and cab signaling. But even at enabling 12 trains per hour, accounting for the switching of the tracks and so forth, the best Union Station can do, and this is just by the simulation, is approximately 20 trains per hour. So if we ever want to do more than 6-minute service on each branch, it's going to trigger doing some improvement beyond Union Station. One of the things we're looking at is a turnback facility in Division 20, where all revenue trains, they would continue out of revenue service into our yard, into Division 20, and turn back in a tractor configuration that allows moving trains through there at a higher speed. What we're looking at is 25 miles an hour. As it is right now, we can only get in and out of Union Station at 9 miles an hour, and that just quite doesn't work. We recently did some testing in early January at Union Station, some overnight testing. We ran about 4 6-car trains and tried to process them as quickly as we can through Union Station. And we learned that today we cannot even do 20 trains per hour if we wanted to. We cannot have 3-minute separation at Union Station. We just can't process them that quickly. The signaling system and the switch, the speeds, everything taken together, it's constrained. Probably the best we can do right now without any change is a train every 4.5 minutes, something like that, which we have to have improvement on that. We can probably do some signal changes there, which are being evaluated or studied right now, and we may do a test for the next 2 or 3 months after some additional changes. But our objective is to try and get trains processed through every 3 minutes.
I'll just offer an observation. About 29 years ago, at an APTA annual conference, Dr. John Dyer, then the general manager of SCRTD, who was brought here to get the red line built, and did, was explaining how they had done the calculations of capacity. And was going into great detail how they were sure that they would be able to handle 376,000 boardings a day, 3-minute headway with 6-car consists. This was at a time where BART had 10-car and WMATA had 8-car. And I remember a question, John, you sure about that 6-car? Oh yeah, sure, no problem at all. So how much would you like to have a little bit longer stations in doing your planning?
I didn't catch that last part of that question.
How much would you like to have a little bit longer stations so you can run some longer consists?
You know, I really don't think about it. If at one point when we cannot serve any more customers and the line is just built out, we'll probably start looking at additional lines to serve the demand. I don't think about a dream if we had longer stations there. That said, though, it almost triggered another thought. Given 300,000 boardings, if we had the frequency out there, I suspect our system could handle that level of ridership. Our trains soak up a lot of people and clear out those platforms. And as soon as they come down, we can almost clear them out if we can run the trains through there. So today, right now, the red and purple line combined do average daily ridership of about 150,000. We've seen recently as much as 160,000. So ridership is there for those lines. Now, when the purple line is extended, I believe the average daily ridership for the purple line alone was an additional 50,000. I don't recall the exact number, something like that. And whole system-wide, all the lines together, looking at...
That's for the first extension. First extension of purple.
Yeah, I'm assuming the Westwood with the VA station. Looking at our whole network, the Gold Line out to Claremont, the East LA extension to whether it's South El Monte or Whittier, Purple Line to VA, Crenshaw, South Bay, LAX extension, Regional Connector. All those, I think our ridership in Ireland was looking at upwards of 450,000, 480,000 average daily riders. It's quite a lot with, relative to what we're doing today.
How much increase in time will the Green Line get if you do the Crenshaw, the Century Station you're talking about, Century and Aviation? How much will the running time increase out to Norwalk?
Right now we're looking at one-way travel time from Norwalk to Redondo Beach Station, 34 minutes each direction. If we cut that line at Century or Imperial Aviation and then up to Century Aviation, we're kind of doing this with the travel time. We're looking at, I think, 2.5 minutes to going into the tail track, and another 2.5 minutes coming back. I think it's we're taking off like 9 minutes going from aviation down to marine, and we're replacing with 2.5 minutes. So we're looking at an overall trip time difference on that one-way distance of, let's decrease down to like 28 minutes, I think, 27 minutes, something like that. Now there will be an additional transfer time, almost a penalty, if you will, for existing riders that are traveling from Norwalk that want to go down to Torrance. Right now we don't think there are a lot of riders doing that. We're going to have to go back and relook at what's going on out there. But those riders would be impacted. They would need to travel up to the Century Aviation Station, transfer to Crenshaw Line train to travel down south to Redondo Beach Station and eventually Florence Station.
And how are you going to get across the runways at LAX? Is it going to be a grade?
Very carefully.
Yes.
Between planes.
If you're out there right now and you look at the junction, where the junction would be at Imperial Aviation, it's up in the air. We're maintaining that alignment. Once trains continue north on that alignment, they're immediately going to go into a steep grade. I think it's about 5%. Immediately go into a U section and into a trench. So we're looking at crossing that flight protected zone in a trench. Now we're looking at one of the things we're buying, is it a full complete tunnel, as in twin tunnel, or a box culvert underneath, or can it be a more shallow trench with a cap adjacent to the runways? We're looking at that. One variation or the other, depending on how long that covered trench is, will trigger perhaps some ventilation infrastructure there. We're trying to narrow that as much as possible.
At the Westwood VA station, I've seen plans. The proposed station would have 4 tracks. Is there an operational need for that? Is that the case? Is that what they're thinking?
Well, it's one thing that's changed. Right now we're looking at a track configuration that has very fast crossovers between the UCLA station and the VA station. The track behind the station, we're looking at Super 8s, or number 8 crossovers. Those would be much slower. It'd be a center platform station. We're looking at trains, instead of coming in every 2 to 4 minutes apart, we're looking at trains evenly spaced every 4 minutes apart. It looks like a center platform with number 15 crossovers on the front end and Super 8s on the back. Looks like we did the job.
Dave, you have a question?
Just out of curiosity, the East LA extension is into the El Monte. What is that just conceptual right now, or are they?
That's somewhere in the planning phase. I haven't seen a lot of that project in the past 6 months.
Is it part of the 3010 plan?
Yes. For a date that we're looking at on our calendar, it's in fiscal year 2022.
So that's a little over 10 years out then.
Approximately. But the 3010 initiative, right now it's a plan or it's an initiative on Metro. We're adopting that and moving forward as if it's going to happen. We still need on the federal side for some federal action to take place.
And you have your routing all figured out at this point?
Not for the East LA Gold Line extension. I believe they still need to choose an alignment for that. Whether it's to Whittier or it's to South El Monte, that decision hasn't been made yet. For all the other projects, for the most part, we know where the trains are going.
Were you going to cover some other sections besides the?
Yes.
Well, why don't we go on to that so we don't run out of time?
I see it's 8:10 already.
We're okay time-wise, but we just want to make sure we cover everything.
For service adjustments, we're looking at changing the Gold Line frequency. As you know, the trains run every 7.5, 8 minutes apart. That's 8 trains per hour. We're looking at going to 6-minute service. That's 10 trains per hour. And that's going to happen with the June shakeup, which I believe is June 27th. All trains will be 2-car trains.
No more 3?
No more 3s. It'll be the same capacity in each direction. If you count the number of cars passing by a station in each direction, right now it's 20 cars per hour. In June, on June 27th, it'll also be 20 cars per hour. It'll allow us probably more even distribution on the cars. Right now, the 3rd car, people don't know it's coming in unless they're watching it come around the corner. So we'll have the load spread out a little bit more. For other service adjustments, we're looking at the Blue Line also this June, going from about a 5.5, 6-minute frequency to an even 6-minute frequency. What that means is instead of 11 trains per hour we're going to cut back and go back to 10 trains per hour. I guess theoretically, it is a service step back. It is 1 less train per hour at peak times, but we need to do that to enable the Expo line trains to actually fit into a time slot so that we can have even spacing trains every 3 minutes apart on the schedule, and also to make the junction operations move more efficiently. After that, the red and purple line, no changes this coming June. It's in part because of the testing we learned in January at Union Station. But coming in December or January, about 8 months from now, approximately 7 months from now, we're looking at 2 concepts. It could be 8 trains per hour on each branch, or something. We just really don't know. It really depends on how frequently we can turn trains around at Union Station. The trains, we would probably do away with the 6-car trains on the red line, and trains on each branch would be 4-car trains. We would keep capacity at approximately the same as in terms of measuring cars per hour in each direction.
Go ahead.
Equipment. The braided cars, I was telling you, I was on the Gold Line the other day.
Laser.
All right. Equipment. Are the braided cars exclusively now on the Gold Line and no other type of equipment on the Gold Line?
No.
Siemens are still on there?
Yes.
Any other questions on that? Alec?
When you refer to the headways, like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, are you talking about the rush hour or midday or weekend?
I'm talking peak periods.
Just peak period. What about weekends?
Weekends, so I don't think we're looking at any changes. We're looking at trains every 12 minutes on each line. That's pretty much the base schedule.
West?
Quick question on the Gold Lines. Do you put up the prompters to announce train times coming? Some of the stations have them parallel to the tracks, which don't really help that much because you only see them from a very small part of the platform. Is there any way to remedy that, or is that not going to happen in the future? Because
that is something we're talking about internally when we're looking at. One of the ones that I don't want to say dear to my heart, but I see it most often. It hasn't been turned on yet. It's at the Allen Station. I don't know if that's the one you're thinking of, Marriott or Mission Station.
Fillmore Station too. That's right. It's all the way down the platform.
It's really awkward. especially when you're looking at narrow platforms, a central platform. If you want to look at that and it's up there, and you have the edge of the platform behind you, it's something we need to relook at. So,
Okay, we're talking. Tom, sorry.
When the Pasadena Gold Line was originally constructed by the Pasadena Blue Line Construction Authority, just one of those California things, don't try to understand it. In order to save money on construction, they took out a number of the propulsion power supply stations, some of which MGA put right back in before they started operation. How do you fix that? How much can you do with the current arrangement of propulsion power supply, recognizing you need a safety factor if you lose one?
today, we don't have any problem running 6-minute service, 3-car trains, if we have the cars available. The traction power arrangement can't support that level of service. I can't speak to trains running every 5 minutes. I suspect we can do it, but I don't know for certain. Fortunately, the planning work has already been done where we've identified where, if we're missing a traction power substation, we can put it in.
You talked about balancing out the headways on the red line when you get it done. Have you done projections? Is the two legs of the gold line, are they about even in ridership, so that if you have the downtown connector connected to these two legs, is that going to work too, or have you projected that far ahead?
No, we haven't projected that far ahead. I think that after the first 2 or 3 months, we kept track of, or at least I know I kept track of ridership and what's occurring on each branch.
Yeah.
But today they've just they've melted together. And I just see one figure. I probably see the same figures that are probably shown on the website.
And when you looked at it at the beginning, was there a higher ridership? I'm assuming there's a higher ridership toward Pasadena.
Yes, yes, there is.
Yeah.
I mean, there are more stations.
Right.
It has much larger capture area, and I suspect East LA line hasn't quite been built out far enough for it to really trigger higher ridership. But once the regional connector comes in, as other rail lines come in, the more we increase our capture, the more riders and fans we get with the system.
Capacity issues with the blue line time, the expo line time at the Pico station. Are you gonna possibly add a third track or like out front of Staples Center? Because I would assume there's going to be some capacity issues there.
It's going to be a through station in each direction. If we have capacity issues, it would be with passengers. Fortunately, trains are running through there every 3 minutes, so if we can just squeak them right out. I don't know if, given if there's no large events, Staples event occurring or something else occurring, we could probably handle the passengers as they come up to the platform. If there are events, staff is out there, such as a Laker parade. We have staff such as myself, Bruce, and our sheriffs out to assist with passenger crowding on platforms.
Carlos.
I think a word that caught my attention is you said volunteers. You said you're expecting 375 volunteers for the opening of November 11th. You said something like that?
Yes. Unfortunately, if you're looking to volunteer, we would love to accept you, but we cannot. It has to be a Metro staff person, somebody that's already within the organization. We cannot even have volunteers that were past employees. They have to be with the organization right now. It's largely for a liability, and also we just can't have volunteers. We have to pay them too, so they have to be on the books and so forth. They have to go through safety training and some steps before they can actually be out there and do some work for us. Was that the question you were getting at?
Yeah, exactly, because it seems like an untapped resource to improve the system, the volunteers, the information, safety. And if you have a whole army of people that are excited as we build the system, and you have a whole, slaughtering the sheep that may want to help you with the wool here.
Well, I should say that Transit Coalition will have a booth whenever the line opens, and we are actually looking for volunteers. You don't have to have safety training. You just have to be able to enjoy the public and tell them a lot of things, and they ask a lot of good questions, and we have a lot of fun. So we need volunteers too. So if you can't get employed by Metro because you're not a Metro staffer, Transit Coalition will gratefully accept your volunteerism and plan for that opening weekend, whenever it may be, because we will be looking for volunteers. There were some more questions.
A general question, how is Metro planning to integrate the increased train service with the reduced bus service? Like, are they planning to increase the bus service to, to complement the train feeder, stuff like that?
It's largely occurs on the bus side, and whereas I'm on the
So
rail
that's not
side.
your department, okay.
I wish I could answer that. I can answer that before a line is open, we do look at making the system more efficient. But sometimes it does result in removing duplicative services, because in many cases, a rail line is going in where a very successful bus line currently is.
I can sort of answer that a little bit, is that as the bus lines feed the rail lines, as long as there's a robust relationship, if the bus line carries a significant amount of people and they transfer the trains or vice versa, the bus line will also grow. It's just a matter of the layout. In some cases where the traditional bus lines were taken out because they overlaid the rail lines, well, there was some. You may not have had the buses between Long Beach and Los Angeles, or between Pasadena and Los Angeles in some cases, but you have more frequent train service. But as long as you've got perpendicular bus service intersecting to the trains, and you're, especially with the Expo line, you've got a significant amount of bus service on streets like Vermont and Western, and you would definitely either have the same amount or more service on those streets, because you're going to have a lot of transfers. It's just the same thing like at the Western Purple Line station now. If you get 100 people that leave the Purple Line, they need significant bus service to hit the pulses there. So
It's like on the Orange Line, they run every 6 minutes, but then you wait 40 minutes for a feeding bus, like this.
well, that's the unfortunate problem in the San Fernando Valley, that Supervisor Yaroslavsky didn't quite understand that the Orange Line is a high-density line, and you need 15-minute service on some of the north-south bus services. I mean, those that followed us from back then, we had another transit group called the FOOL, which is Friends of the Orange Line. And the whole idea behind the FOOL is that there was all sorts of things that Metro didn't do. You didn't have very good intersecting bus service. I mean, we have streets like DeSoto that have buses running every 55 minutes, not even on a clock headway. Try memorizing a schedule every 55 minutes. And then the service stops. For example, first Metrolink trains get into the Sylmar Metrolink station at 5:10 or so in the morning. The first bus service south from goes down Balboa Boulevard, leaves the station at 6:28, an hour after the first train gets there, and it just misses the second train. So, and then by the time it gets south to the Orange Line, you can't get to a job at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, because the first bus gets you south around 7:30 for your transfer. So there are a lot of problems in the valley in terms of the service robustness and hitting it. That's one of the things perhaps as an advocacy group that will work on. But anyway, so back to the rail piece, but that's explaining something.
I'm just about done. I wanted to make a plug, as I'm reminded about this. The Blue Line is over 20 years old, and one of the things Metro has been doing in maintenance away staff internally, they've been rehabilitating the grade crossings. Some of you may have seen the work that's been going on out there. It usually starts on a Friday night. We do either close down the Blue Line between two segments, or we single track through a segment, but all weekend we're doing a grade crossing rehab. We've timed them where we're doing one a month, and that's been going on for about a year and a half approximately, maybe actually 2 years. Our last grade crossing rehab effort is actually the first weekend in June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. After that, they're done. They've done a lot of good work, they've done a lot of learning, and we could probably see them in the future doing some additional work that's typically outside of their scope. They could be doing, I don't want to say where they'll be working, but we could see them doing some more work on rail lines elsewhere.
Blue Line will be 21 years old on July 14th.
Oh.
I was on the second car of the second train on opening day.
And what car were you on, Ken?
I was on the third train out, but I don't remember which car.
Okay. Well, it's 21 years old, and we're gonna buy it a beer. We do have time for some more questions, if the audience has more questions.
What's the status of ordering more equipment after the whole Breda hullabaloo, and do you still have cars still coming in from that original Breda order?
No, I think all the cars are in now. I think the last one was supposed to be here in April, and I believe it was. I haven't heard differently.
I wrote 45 the other day, so I don't know if that's the last one.
Does it work? I don't know. Right now, we're not constrained for cars. We do have extra cars because we're stocked up, so to speak, for the Expo project opening later this year. Cross your fingers. With regard to the next procurement, we're already underway. It's I believe it's out for bid, and final bid should be coming in by the end of summer. We hope to have cars arriving. I think it's in 2014 in preparation for Expo 2 and Foothill 2.
You'll have enough for Expo 1.
There is
Expo 1,
there
yes.
is enough for Expo 1.
For Expo 2 and Foothill, that's what we need to make sure we have enough cars for.
That's
what
one
we're working towards.
Now, that's one thing you didn't touch upon is the Foothill extension of the Gold Line. We sort of always ignore that, but
It wasn't on the list you gave me.
I know. But here's the humor about this is that
Stick to the agenda.
no, it's just a bit of humor. Is that I always think that we should get somebody from the Gold Line Authority to talk about their project, and for some reason, I don't know what it is. I just never occurs to me. However, it is a functioning line that's soon to break ground for more than just the iconic basket bridge. And how does that fit into the operation? Well, we didn't ask. It's coming.
Well, actually for practical purposes, for Expo 2 and Foothill 2A, essentially those projects are basically under construction. I don't know when the shovel turning thing was, but from our perspective, it might as well be. The first things we'll see is utility relocation. Those are actually other agencies that are doing this for us. With regards to how it's going to operate, it's going to be an extension of the Gold Line. We're probably looking at, I don't think we need to run every train out to Azusa. It could be every other train. We're short-turning trains at Sierra Madre. For example, a peak service on the front main part of the portion from Sierra Madre to downtown is operating every 6 minutes. We could theoretically see trains every 12 minutes from Sierra Madre out to Azusa Citrus. Of course, a lot of things need to happen between now and then. Plans could change.
John?
Yeah, I work on the Pasadena light rail. I just think that, I think you're maybe severely underestimating the ridership that's going to be out there, because that's where the congestion on the 210 is farther east. So I hope you take a close look at that. I guess my general question is this: it sounds like from the 2018, 2019, that time frame, you're going to have like 3 or 4 construction projects underway at the same time. And how do you envision managing all that? It's a lot of projects.
I can sort of answer that.
Fortunately, on the construction side, they're much more involved during construction. Metro Rail on operations and service planning, we get more involved closer to revenue testing and revenue operations, making sure the final design elements are out there and so forth. Hopefully, that time frame will have less of a staff commitment than we do have now. Right now, we have 6, 8 projects that are in some form of development, and we're in all directions right now.
I'll sort of answer that in terms of, first of all, there's 3 rail projects, but there's 3 different operators or 3 different authorities. There's Metro that's building the Orange Line and building preliminary construction on the Crenshaw Line. At the same time, we have the Expo Authority that's building Phase 1 and 2, which is an independent group of people. And we have the Gold Line Construction Authority that's building the Gold Line, the continuing phase and additional phases. So you basically have Metro and 2 other units. What will happen with Metro is that the Orange Line will complete roughly next summer, and that group of construction experts will probably switch off to the Crenshaw line, and somewhere around the phasing there'll be a team. There's a lot of contracting. There's people in this room. I don't know if I've properly introduced Carlos Morgner and Pat Means, but they're consultants and they specialize in when there's more than the Metro staff can do. People like Carlos have a whole crew of people that specialize in these different components, and they step in and do some of that work. Is that correct, Carlos?
As much as we can get.
As much as you can get. So, but that's, so it's sort of designed so Metro can have sort of a stable level of staffing, and then there's business people out there such as Carlos that have lots and lots of people that work with them, and they expand and contract as necessary. So it's been, how many gastric surgeries have you had since the red line? You're right. So, but that's how sort of it works in that part of the business. Any other rail questions?
Good question.
All right, well, this will be the last question, and we're going to go into the business part of the meeting.
What's the latest, or if anything, on the I-405 Sepulveda corridor? Will it be a rail line? Anything on that?
I don't know. There are a couple projects that are not well defined yet for my department to get involved with. Scoville House project is one of them. Santa Ana Branch is another one. We don't know yet. It doesn't seem like there's enough commitment about what mode, one way or the other, what those will be.
I can answer that. For some people actually did hear me on the KCRW the other night. I was on Which Way LA. And for those that haven't heard, if anybody hasn't heard that we're shutting down the 405 freeway for 50-some hours? Yeah. Anybody not heard about that? Freeway's being shut down, and the radio station was just agog that we could actually shut down the freeway, and kept asking, well, can't you just have like one lane shut down? And it's like, well, what you don't understand is if you go over the bridge that has this big arch across the 5 on the Mulholland, well, if that bridge actually, anything comes down on the freeway, you have crushed cars. It doesn't quite go well with public relations in the newspapers. But what they do when they actually take the bridge down is you actually bring in trucks and trucks of sand, and you build a 3 or 4 feet worth of sand underneath where the bridge is being cut down, so if anything does escape, it doesn't destroy the roadway below. And a lot of people couldn't understand is the only way to take down the bridge, and it's designed, you take half of the bridge width down one year and the other half the next year. But it's quite a complex project to take a bridge down and rebuild it, but you have to close the freeway because that's the story. But the other part of the KCRW piece was was our proposal, which is the rail tunnel. People have been hearing about this, and anybody didn't get and wants a March newsletter, we do have the rail tunnel coverage here. The idea essentially is that Justin Walker here helped conceive that if you take bus rapid transit and go over the freeway, the buses don't have any horsepower. They're not going to go any faster than the 761 bus now. They can only carry 6,000 to 8,000 people an hour, even if you get the most amount of bus riders you could ever find. At the same time, if you were to put light rail over the freeway, because you want to keep roughly a 4% grade going up from the valley floor up to the top of the mountain and through the pass, what you'd have to do is actually have the rail line roughly 180 feet above the floor of the freeway. In other words, if you can imagine this, is it the Stratosphere in Vegas that's got the roller coaster on the top? Yeah. Just imagine 1,000 people in a 3 or 6 car light rail train going 180 feet above the valley floor. And isn't that earthquake country? Anybody know about that? So the idea is that, well, monorail would be the same thing, except monorail has roughly half the capacity. The whole point is that you don't want to be taking that amount of people 180 feet up in the air. It's one thing to be high up in the air, and there are some very high vehicle overpasses in the freeway system, but just to get the light rail at the right level to carry that amount of volume of people and weight 180 feet up. So what we looked at is we saw that the elevation, if you have a tunnel between Van Nuys and Ventura on the alignment of the orange line down Van Nuys Boulevard, straight south to UCLA Westwood, you can do a tunnel at 0.9%, less than 1% grade, and the trains can still go to 59, 69 miles an hour, so you can roughly get between the valley in West LA in about 6 minutes. So what Transit Coalition as an advocacy group is just presenting the facts out that light rail could be difficult because it's a longer trip around the freeway pass because it's not straight and linear. Plus you'd have to carve out more of the mountains there to get it through. Buses aren't going to be the best solution there, and because UCLA has the first, third, fifth, seventh, ninth, and 11th largest parking structures in the world, it might be a good idea to connect the Valley, UCLA, and by that time with the purple line in Westwood, it would just make a lot of sense to have an additional rail tunnel on. So it's a solution. The public vetting will be coming out probably, I think they're hiring the consultants this year or next year to start on that public vetting. And it just as educated consumers in this room here, when these meetings start to happen, it's just up to you guys to come out and say, you know, this is what would make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then you're going to ask for something else. But that's sort of how we vision it to be happening. So I hope that answers the question about that project. It's getting there, but there's all these other projects that are getting the attention, and the other ones will queue into place as they come. Any other questions for Brandon? Let's give him a hand.